My name's Kate Shorland and I'm joined by Tarina Vale. We're just introducing the webinar today. I'm one of the Quality Teaching Advisors here at the Quality Teaching Academy, and Tarina's the Project Manager of the Strengthening Induction project. So we might have been in touch with you for providing information somewhere along the way. And Jenny, I'll introduce you in a moment, but if you wouldn't mind just moving to our next slide, that would be lovely, so that I can do an acknowledgement of country. We're presenting this afternoon from Awabakal country here at the Callaghan campus of the University of Newcastle. It's an absolutely beautiful bushland campus that we're privileged to come and continue learning that's been happening for thousands of years. So we'd like to pay our respects to Aboriginal elders past, present and emerging, and to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that we're presenting on today, and to warmly welcome any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander colleagues who are joining us for the webinar today. So it's my pleasure to pass over to Laureate Professor Jenny Gore, who's the Director of the Teachers and Teaching Research Centre here at the University of Newcastle, who is going to share with us about the Strengthening Induction project and some of our recent findings. So over to you, Jenny.
Thank you, Kate, and thanks so much everyone for coming. I know it's the end of a long school day, so I'm going to try and be pretty snappy, but please feel free to ask any questions or take me back to something if I'm going too fast. We're really hoping that more schools might take up this opportunity, particularly as the opportunity is on the end of running out a little bit. So we've still got time to get more schools involved, but we don't want to wait too long. But I'll come back to that in a moment. So Strengthening Induction through Quality Teaching Rounds, it's funded by the Australian government. So Jason Clare launched the initiative in July 2023. Got a bunch of academics involved and a whole terrific support team led by Tarina, who's on screen with us. So the project really aims to not only improve the quality of beginning teachers' teaching, which is a kind of a given when we're talking about the quality teaching model. So not only to improve their teaching, but also to improve morale, self-efficacy, well-being and job satisfaction. We know that those feelings about teaching are really important to teacher retention, and so really critical aim. At the same time, though, we're trying to support the experienced teachers who play a role in teacher induction. And we know from this project that there's a lot of experienced teachers who are out there supporting those teachers and playing that really important mentorship or guidance role. The project was, as I said, funded by the National Teacher Workforce Action Plan, which was announced in December of 2022. And it's running from basically July 23 until kind of July 26 is when we really have to stop recruiting a lot of schools. So we've got another year and a bit for you to get involved. The project is designed to support 1,600 teachers to do quality teaching rounds. So effectively funding the professional development component of a 2-day workshop. Schools then need to provide for the conditions for teachers to do quality teaching rounds. I'm going to explain what that is in a moment. The professional development then, as I said, is free, meaning it's funded by the federal government. Each group of 4 teachers that we're seeking to involve in the project must involve 2 who are in their first 3 years of full-time equivalent status, and at least 1 who's more experienced. You know, we know in some schools that there's an awful lot of beginning teachers, so the more experienced might mean they're in their 4th year, but they're just not in their first 3 years. And we certainly didn't want to leave any teachers out, you know, in the 4 to 5 or 4 to 7 year range. What we're finding in this project is when we ask teachers, do they intend to leave the profession in the next 6 months? We want to change the colours on this slide. It was just done last week. It's a bit too bright for my liking, but we can see that about 72% of teachers overall, 71% of early career and 74% of more experienced teachers say they have no intention to leave the profession in the next 6 months. Then we have 15% who's saying that they have a very mild intention. They may consider it. Around about 8% on average, if you look at the top, who have a moderate intention. Then you've got 4, 1 and I think it's 2 in there, 4, 2 and 1, so a total of about 7% who really are very seriously considering leaving. We hear a lot about the dire teacher shortage and the importance of retention. It absolutely is important. In fact, I'm just finishing a paper, which is for a special volume of the British Educational Research Journal called Making Teaching More Attractive. And what I'm arguing there is that teaching becomes more attractive when people feel positive about themselves and the work of teaching. But what we're finding is teachers, once they've done rounds, their intention to leave on average is going down considerably. So again, at the top, we have the whole sample, and then at the bottom, broken into early career in the middle, and then experienced teachers at the bottom. Now, it doesn't look like much of a reduction there, but the confidence interval, so the lines either side of the mean, the dot in the middle, if they're not overlapping, when you look horizontally across the page, then it's statistically significant. So these are approaching statistical significance. We've only got relatively small numbers in there at the moment. We are very confident that it will be a statistically significant impact on intention to leave. Just to summarise that, what we're finding is that almost 40% of those who had some intention to leave now have 0 once they've done rounds, 4 days of quality teaching rounds, and almost 2/3 of those in the high and severe categories now have no intention to leave. So I think these are statistics that are really showing the impact on at least that key variable of intention to leave. We know that retention is actually a more effective way to address the teacher shortages than is recruitment, because when you want to recruit more teachers into the profession, it's the period of time training them, getting them into the profession, having them build up a critical mass. You're talking a 5 to 10 year initiative, whereas if we can work on the retention of experienced teachers, those who've already got some time with us in the profession, then again, much more efficient. We know that it not only improves retention, though, it's also improving teaching and learning outcomes. And that ultimately is what we're in school for, is to improve outcomes for students. Sharon Feynman-Nemser reminds us that the first years of teaching influence not only whether people remain, but what kind of teacher they become. She says if we want schools to produce more powerful learning on the part of students, we have to provide powerful learning on the part of teachers. And that's what quality teaching rounds is doing. Some of you will be very familiar with the model and the rounds process. For those who are not, the model really is a comprehensive or holistic model of pedagogy that really honours the complexity of teaching. In so doing, it actually honours the realities of teachers' lives. Teachers don't have the luxury to focus on one thing at a time when everything's going on in classrooms. So this model treats teaching in its entirety with the 3 dimensions of intellectual quality. How do we develop deep understanding of important knowledge? Quality learning environment. How do we ensure classrooms actually boost student learning? They're not just safe, comfortable, happy places, but they're really boosting learning. And how do we make learning significant or connected with students' lives and to the wider world? Each of the 3 dimensions has 6 elements. And I don't, obviously, in this half hour have time to go into them, but you can see just looking at the names here that they deal with how we treat knowledge, how we treat students, how we treat each other in classrooms. It deals with behavioural issues like self-regulation. It deals with equity issues like cultural knowledge, inclusivity. So it's a really holistic account of teaching. It doesn't deal so much with the strategies of the classroom. It deals with the qualities of the classroom and what it is that we're aiming towards. And that's really important because it doesn't matter whether you're using explicit instruction, inquiry-based instruction, cooperative learning, guided discovery, direct instruction, you can still attend to what's the quality of the student learning experience being provided in this setting. What we hear from teachers, and Andrew's a deputy in his 40s, he said, this is the first time in my career I feel I'm actually teaching students. Until now, I've just been giving them work to do, which I think is a really poignant statement of the kind of difference this approach can make. Teachers have a deeper understanding of what it means to teach, not just to get through the curriculum, but to ensure that they're ensuring their students learning about important ideas, partly defined, of course, by the curriculum. We found very early on that having a model wasn't enough. We needed a way to work with the model that was also powerful. So Quality Teaching Round is designed to empower teachers to do this with and for each other. We offer the 2-day workshop. Apart from that, we have no involvement. So 4 teachers come to the 2-day workshop. That sets them up to run the initiative, not just for their group of 4, but for other teachers in the school subsequently. The process of every round, so there's 4 days of rounds, looks like this. They begin by discussing something they've all read. It can be a TED talk, a YouTube clip, a news item, a policy document, an academic paper, a professional paper. It can be anything. But we ask teachers to find something they'd like to discuss with their colleagues, and usually each person in the group takes their turn to select the reading. We've thought about getting rid of this part of the process, but teachers absolutely love the chance to talk with each other about educational ideas. It also means they have new knowledge together that's shared, and it really helps to build this sense of professional learning community. We have 4 teachers in what we call PLCs, professional learning communities, but we don't use that as just a synonym for group. It's about professional learning and building that sense of community. After the discussion, they go and watch one member of the group teach an entire lesson. We always watch entire lessons because we believe it's more respectful of teachers and of the teaching learning process. I certainly have been in a classroom where I've wished people came in 5 minutes later. They didn't come in when the lesson was humming, you know, they came in just at that flat point. So watching the entire lesson enables teachers to focus on what students are learning. It's not just the rapport, the relationship the teacher has, how organised they are. It's actually about student learning. Everyone, including the teacher who taught the lesson, then codes the lesson on the 1 to 5 scales that we have associated with each of the 18 elements. It's really important that the teacher codes themselves. I mean, they have a different perspective. Everyone has a different perspective on the lesson. But when the teacher codes themselves, you don't have to worry about coding me a 1 on cultural knowledge, because I coded myself a 1, because I know that non-dominant cultural knowledge wasn't addressed in my lesson, and nor did it need to be. I think that's the other really important thing with this model. Some elements will rightly code a 1, but the point is not the numbers. The point is the discussion that the specificity of the numbers enables. Really importantly, the numbers remain confidential to the group. They're not shared with the principal. They're not shared with colleagues. The group makes a commitment not to share the numbers outside of their professional learning community. And that really creates a safe environment for teachers to do this kind of work. They then have an extended discussion. So each teacher takes their turn to say, well, I coded, let's say the first element, I coded deep knowledge of 5 because there was a sustained focus on these 2 key concepts. The next person might say, well, I only coded it a 2 because I thought you did so much in the lesson that nothing was covered in any depth. And then the 3rd person will speak, and then the 4th person will speak. It doesn't matter if you're the principal or a first-year out teacher, you take your turn to speak, and we usually vary who goes first, element by element. So everyone has that experience. Once everyone has shared their code and the reason why they gave the code, the evidence they're drawing from in the lesson, they then try to come to agreement about, well, what is the best code? Given what everybody saw and everyone's thoughts on this, what is the best code for deep knowledge in this particular lesson? And again, it's those really rich conversations that teachers have, which is the power of this process. We also find that it happens really quickly. Often when you put teachers in groups to discuss stuff, there's that awkwardness of who goes first, who says the most, where do we begin? In this process, all we need to do is decide who's going to speak first in sharing their codes on deep knowledge, and the process is underway. And it's really powerful to experience and to watch. What we find is that it also really builds relationships among teachers. So Susan was put in a group. She didn't even want to be there. She said, I didn't like my colleagues. in the school, which is a reality, and they didn't like me, but it was only on hearsay and reputation. When I was in the room with them and working with them, I respected them, learned to trust them, and learned who they really were. So really, we find that this process has transformative effects on teachers' relationships with one another, as well as on their understanding of and practice of good teaching. What we find in all of our research is that we have, in a number of randomised controlled trials, found significant impact on student achievement in maths and reading. Now, when we say significant, we mean statistically significant, which very few people around the world have found professional development having that kind of an impact. And really importantly, what we're doing is a distal form of PD. If we think of proximal PD, you'd be teaching teachers about maths and reading, or even about specific parts of maths and reading comprehension. We're teaching teachers, if you like, or the PD is helping teachers to understand pedagogy in general, but it's having these effects on maths and reading, which is really remarkable. That's using progressive achievement tests, which many of you probably use in your schools. We've seen these results in two subjects, so both in two subjects, already had that up there, in both years 3, 4 and 5, 6. We did a study in year 8. Unfortunately, it was in Victoria immediately post-COVID, and so we just didn't have enough power in that study for significant impact. We've seen it in 2 states, both New South Wales and Queensland. We know you're coming from all over the country. It's part of the feature of this study is that it's national and cross-sectoral. We've also seen the results come from fully face-to-face and fully online modes of doing this. So what we find in some situations where teachers don't have enough teachers in their school to form PLCs, or they can't release that many, they can form a network and have 2 teachers in one school and 2 in another, and they can do the rounds together. We also have had significant results when I've led the PD, but also when our advisors like Kate have led the PD, which means it's scalable, it's not dependent on me or anyone else. And we've also had an independent trial done where we didn't assess the data. We have people from the University of Queensland assessing the impact. In terms of teachers, we find positive impact on the quality of their teaching. The effect size there is around 0.4. We've seen impact on teacher morale, teacher efficacy and confidence. Really interestingly, experienced teachers tell us they feel more confident after doing rounds. I think it's partly because a lot of experienced teachers don't get meaningful feedback on the entirety of their teaching practice. But we could discuss that. Also, really substantial improvement in meaningful collaboration and therefore powerful forms of collegiality, not just the contrived collegiality that is really common when people are kind of forced to come together to do things. And that collectively has a really great impact on school culture. I don't think we've got the Cessnock data in here, have we, Kate? But Cessnock High School, for example, one of the most disadvantaged schools in New South Wales, is now number 1 in the Hunter for NAPLAN value add and number 11 in the state. Their attendance has improved at triple the state average. Their HSC results have improved by 50% and their behaviour has improved dramatically. Real major turnaround in the whole school community because it's established a culture of high expectations and achievement. Here we have a quote from just one of the teachers involved in the study who's in her first year. She said, before rounds, it was so overwhelming, so isolating. I didn't know if the 4 years of uni was worth it. But after doing this, I'm like, I can get there. I love what I do. So really, those are the kinds of effects. Why does this work? We know that things can fail when you just focus on the surface features. Like some people would say, well, quality teaching rounds is just peer observation, or it's just like lesson study, or it's just like instructional rounds. It's actually not. There's a little bit more to it. And that more is that it has this shared model of quality teaching to really anchor teachers, what teachers notice, what they comment on, and the refinement of their practice in really specific ways. It gives teachers sustained time for critical analysis of practice. Those 4 days are transformative. Teachers tell us once they do quality teaching rounds, they can't go back. They can't teach without thinking about explicit quality criteria, for example, one of our elements. And just having that time together to focus on core business, which is really hard. It shouldn't be, but in the way schools operate these days and with so much going on and so many shortages, it's a reality. And it really builds a climate of trust. So, for example, we ask the most experienced person in the group to go first. It might be, most experienced as in old like me, or it might be the other deputy principal or the principal in the group. We ask them to go first, to borrow a class if they need to, and to put their teaching, if you like, on the line for their colleagues to show that they can be vulnerable, but it's a really powerful process. We're also, as we said, keeping it confidential, making sure the conversation is respectful. We don't say, I gave you a 4 or a 5. We say, I coded this element a 4 or a 5. So the 2-day workshop really helps people to understand some of the nuances of doing this to ensure that successful experience for everybody. So far, we've had expressions of interest from schools all over the country. Not all of these have yet translated into doing rounds, but really fantastic. An initiative that kind of began in New South Wales, because that's where we live, has certainly spread not only up the East Coast now, but all over, which is great. So how does it work? If you were interested in doing this in your school, you need 4 participating teachers, 2 of whom are early career, to complete 2 surveys before they do rounds. They take about 10 minutes each. We do 2 rather than 1 because we all know that you can have a particularly bad or good day that can sway your results. So 2 surveys, they then come to a workshop online or face-to-face. They don't all have to come to the same workshop, which I think is really important. And then they do a set of rounds. You need to find the time for them to do those rounds in your school professional development calendar. And ideally they're done over about 4 weeks. So 1 a week for 4 weeks, maybe 1 a fortnight for 4 weeks. And that's it. That's the extent of this initiative, and it's having the kind of impact that I showed earlier. They then complete 2 surveys afterwards, and then around week 6 of term 4 every year, we'll then ask them to fill in another survey. So again, very brief survey. We also invite a subset of principals, school leaders and early career and experienced teachers to participate in an interview. So far, we've done about 75 of these interviews, but we're always interested in hearing directly from teachers about their experience. Schools that attend obviously get the fully funded 2-day QTR workshop, which usually costs about $900. Is that right? Something like that. I should pay attention to these things. Schools are also invited to send a principal or a middle leader to a workshop, if you like. We will just run you through what the process feels like so that you have more of an understanding of it. And that's in a free online webinar. And then, of course, teachers and schools should get all of the benefits that I've explained come from this process that we're seeing not only in this study, but in all our studies. With the quantitative data, the survey data, we're finding a reduction in burnout for the participating teachers, increased in shared vision, trust and respect and well-being. And across the bottom, efficacy. Now, self-efficacy is really notoriously difficult to shift. With just 4 days of QTR, improved effective practice efficacy overall, and then the subscales of classroom management, instructional strategies, and can't see it, student engagement. When we break that down by career level with early career teachers in blue, what's really interesting at the bottom in particular is you see pretty much the same slope with both groups of teachers. So this improves the efficacy of all participating teachers, not just early career, which is great. And we see, the other measures in the same kind of direction. With the interview data, what we're finding is teachers talk about how it's enhanced their knowledge of good teaching, refined aspects of their practice, develop those stronger relationships, and they keep collaborating with those people. We deliberately bring together different people from the school. So it might be, the maths teacher, the PE teacher, the art teacher, and the English teacher, or the kindergarten, year 6 and others. We argue that the benefits come because of that difference, not despite the difference. It's the PE teacher who asks, how did you move from here to here? that actually is really valuable because the focus is on the pedagogy. We find teachers have no problem at all sitting in on watching different lessons, and they really value it. In secondary schools, they particularly value it because they get to see their kids with different teachers. And this really improves sense of well-being. If you want to get involved, there's an EOI form that can be completed, and I can come back to that slide if necessary. But really, all we're looking for is consent of the principal to be involved. And you can just make contact with us if you want, rather than send the EOI. Consent from the 4 teachers, 2 surveys that they do 1 week apart. They attend the workshop for 2 days. They're kind of 9 to 3 days, so kind of standard school day. Our workshops get fabulous ratings. There's a thing called the Net Promoter Score. It's basically, would you recommend this to others? They use it in customer relations everywhere. Our Net Promoter Score is in the 70s, which puts it between outstanding and world class. So we get the same Net Promoter Score face-to-face and online. So for those who think sitting for 2 days in front of a screen doing an online workshop, you couldn't think of anything worse. We've made it so it's really valuable. The teachers then do their 4 days of rounds, and then the follow-up surveys. If you would like to get in contact with us, you can always just phone Tarina at the bottom there, or email qtr-induction@newcastle.edu.au, and there's also some information there on our website.
Well, thank you so much, Jenny. We really appreciate you running the webinar and answering all of those questions. And thank you everyone for joining. It was lovely to have you online, and we hope that you look into the Strengthening Induction project. Please be in touch if you have any questions. Thank you.